As a chef, I know flavor doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins on the land. And Westhome's nature-led Australian Wagyu is a story written in the landscape of Northern Australia. Cooking is storytelling, and Westhome Wagyu carries a story of Northern Australia itself, raw, powerful, and deeply authentic. It's a testament to the passion and care raised in the rhythm of Northern Australia. I'm Chef Maylin from 88 Club in Los Angeles, and I invite you to visit westhome.com/Maylin to learn more and taste a story only Westhome nature-led Australian Wagyu can tell. That's westholme.com/MEILIN.
Stated goal in our strategic planning is to, first of all, become what we are calling the publication of choice for the Edmonton region. We do think that if we can solve it here, we can solve the same problem that is in all kinds of different cities in Canada, maybe beyond Canada. And if we can package it up and solve it, then Taproot could be elsewhere. We are closer now than we've ever been, I think, to actually figuring out what's Taproot in a box and how would we take it somewhere else.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Karen Unland. She is the co-founder of Taproot Publishing up in Edmonton, Alberta. I think you're only the second or third Canadian I've had on the show, so I'm excited to talk about that a little bit there too. And Taproot, they're out of Edmonton. We'll get into that in a bit. Karen, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy. As I'm a listener. I don't get to every episode, but I do dip in from now and then because you talk to people that are fighting the same fight that we are, and it's very helpful to hear fellow travelers.
That's good. Thank you for that. The thing with podcasting, with this type of podcast especially, is you can see downloads coming in, but it's just like talking into a void sometimes, unless people tell me. So it's good to put a face with one of those downloads coming in. So you've listened to the show. I kind of start every show. If you could just give myself and the audience a little bit about your background, your story in local media.
Yeah, so I came up mostly through newspapers. I worked at the student newspaper and places like that here in Edmonton. Ended up at the Edmonton Journal, which is the broadsheet here, from 1997 until 2011. So that is a time that kind of straddles the whole up and down of watching what the internet kind of did to the news business, for better and for worse, right? So I started as a reporter and then moved into various different kind of editor roles. And the last role that I had at the Journal was to be kind of the first official line editor who was in charge of EdmontonJournal.com, our website. So the website existed before. It was kind of an afterthought.
Right.
In 2007, they decided we need somebody to actually run this at the same level in a very deep org chart that no longer exists, as the arts editor, the sports editor, and so that was what I did for 4 years. And then in 2011, I just really felt like I've done as much as I can do from the inside, and I need to try to fix this problem on the outside. And so I left the Journal. I went back a year later to run a kind of an innovation project where we interviewed local entrepreneurs and shared what we gleaned from them. And that really, I did that for 3 years, and that was instructive on a lot of fronts, but it mostly helped me understand, if you're going to be in business for yourself, which is kind of what I thought when I left, is I'll just hang out my shingle and be a consultant. It's that's not how business works. You have to be an entrepreneur if you're going to be an entrepreneur. So I soaked up all of that experience. In 2015, I had an idea for a local podcast network. I thought I could see all of these little podcasts emerging in Edmonton that were never going to have enough downloads to sell advertising. We're probably not even going to, how were they ever going to make it so it didn't cost them money to do this, and thus stop doing it? So I came up with this idea for something called the Alberta Podcast Network, and I got to workshop that at this kind of boot camp for entrepreneurial journalists that was run out of CUNY the summer of 2015. So I did that for a while, but at this kind of incubating at the same time of this was Taproot. So Taproot, the seed for Taproot was planted in January of 2016 when Post Media, which is the chain that owns a lot of newspapers in Canada and happened to own the broadsheet and the tabloid in Edmonton and a number of other cities, smashed together the newsrooms for the tabloid and broadsheet in Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, and Vancouver. And lots of journalists lost their jobs. And it was sort of feels like the panic at that time feels a little bit quaint because so many more people lost their jobs since then. But at that point, Mac Mail, who is a local a software developer and an avid City Hall blogger here in Edmonton, someone that I had worked with on various kind of how do we get journalists and bloggers together, kind of hackers kind of idea on various things. But after that big layoff in January 2016, we started to think hard about what are we going to do when we don't have a newspaper anymore? And how do we make sure that people in Edmonton know what's going on? As knowing that this is just one problem,
right.
The broadcast guys are on the downslide as well and all that. And so we just started thinking about we came up with the idea for Taproot and kind of soft launched it in May of 2016. There was an event that we were part of talking about the future of media. And we basically just made sure we had a landing page available to say, Mac and Karen are going to try to solve this problem. Do you want to help them become a member for $100 a month? And enough people did that, put their credit card in and not just say, good job, guys, keep on going, but actually put their money where their mouth was for us to think, okay, people trust us to try to do something. And we incorporated the business in January of 2017 and have kept going since then. It has taken a lot of different turns since then, but it is a going concern.
That's you gave me too many things to dig into there.
Sorry.
I got to pivot. No, it's good. When you said that you got people to take their credit cards out and pay for it, the mechanics might be different in Canada. I'm not sure. There's for-profit, nonprofit status here in the States. Is there something similar there? Are you a for-profit company? How does that work? Maybe you said it and I missed it. Sorry.
No, I didn't. But it because it's a key decision that people who to this kind of thing have to decide. We decided we are a for-profit company. We are not extremely profitable, but we are a for-profit company. Yeah. And we made that decision early on because we just wanted to be nimble. We didn't want to have to run everything past a board or also be beholden to kind of the grant seeking process that ends up being what you're doing is trying to get grants and competing with a lot of other people that are, they're trying to fix some really big problems that are maybe more urgent to people than local news and information. So we are for profit and made that decision on purpose from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm kind of agnostic on for-profit versus nonprofit. I think they both have pros and cons. But you're right, being nimble, being able to do things without and extra added, reporting. Once again, I don't want to speak out of school. I don't know much about the rules in Canada or anything like that. But very, very cool. And where do I want to dig into next? It's also very cool. I saw that you had that podcast network. I'm a podcast guy. obviously
Yeah.
we're on a podcast, so that's a very cool story too. We could nerd out on that on a separate call sometime, so I won't go too far into that right now. Could you talk a little bit more about Taproot on here in terms of, because a lot of folks are in your shoes listening to the show, operators of like local media companies, and you don't have to share numbers or anything with me, but like what are you like, what's hitting the cash register for you? Like what sources of revenue do you have in? What are you experimenting with? Anything you speak about on that front?
Yeah. Maybe I'll weave our revenue picture into a little bit of the chronology, because these things have come on stream over time. So our first revenue stream was membership. That do you want to support Taproot? And that has always been kind of like a public radio model. Like, we don't have a paywall. We don't believe in. We think in order to do the work that we need to do in our community, what we produce has to be widely available and not just for people to pay. So the proposition to members is make it possible for everybody to keep seeing this. And at the very beginning, we were very much like an online magazine that published infrequently, but we would put the money that we got from our members to pay freelancers to do stories, and the stories would be prompted by questions that our members had. So a little bit like the idea that ended up turning into Harkin, and it's kind of like make your readers your assignment desk in a way. So that was like our first thing and it helped us create some processes and stuff, but the metabolism of that was really slow. And there was only so much money we could make from that.
Right.
It was a side project at that point for both Mac and I. Then we kind of hit upon this idea of what began first as weekly newsletters about areas of expertise that we had, things like tech, food. Eventually, it grew to our 7 newsletter suite of weekly newsletters that were like items, basically, like 1 or 2 sentences about things that we noticed in these areas of expertise. And those we got on a weekly cadence, which sped up the metabolism so that people could see, what do I get if I support membership, or if I support Taproot through my membership. But it also gave us a place to sell sponsorship and advertising. So we've never had display ads on our website. I don't know that we ever will. It's not a thing that we concentrate on to drive traffic to our website. What we want people to do is sign up for our newsletters so that they can have a constant relationship with us and get informed over and over and over again with what we're sending them. But that also gives us an opportunity to tell advertisers and sponsors, people read this on purpose. It's not coming to them by accident. They're intentional, and they're going to be really happy that you made it possible for them to know this stuff about Edmonton. So that helped a lot to kind of solidify our business model. And then because of the kind of technology that Mac built and the methodology that we created along the way to be able to do this on a repeated kind of what we call a pay attention engine, kind of.
I like
to
that.
kind of just gather all the stuff that's happening in tech in Edmonton and give it back to people. That turned out to be something that some organizations wanted us to do for them as well. So they said, like, I love what you're doing. What I want is like newsletter content for us to use that is everything that's happening among the people that are in our community or on the topic that's interesting to us. And so that allowed us to kind of spin out a B2B business that was like selling what we call briefings to organizations that wanted that same kind of thing. And that developing that business enabled us to like become full-time working so that Mac and I could work full-time at Taproot. And then that enabled us to launch our daily newsletter, which brought, more real estate for us to sell sponsorship and advertising and eventually sponsored content into. So in a way, we've kind of bolted on new things along the way, which has its own challenges running a business. But each one of these things also kind of helps the other things go. So there's a little bit of a flywheel in there. Yeah. So go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say that's very cool. I was just gonna ask. You said it was you and Mac when you started. I'm guessing it was just the two of you. What's the kind of organization look like now, like in terms of staff and everything?
So right now, there's the two of us. We have 2 full-time reporters and a part-time person who looks after our events calendar, which is like a really important part of also the engine that we feed in order to inform people about what's going on in the Edmonton area. Yeah, there's 4.5 FTEs, and then when we can, we have an intern right now from one of the local J schools, and we bring folks like that in when we can.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, cool. And then I was going to ask, the majority of this audience is American. And I always joke on this podcast that I'm in Western Colorado in the Mountain West, and we're like the forgotten region of our massive country. I get in a car and I go to see my sister and in-laws in Montana. It's about 12 hours north of here.
Yeah.
To get to Edmonton, you'd have to get in your car again and go a lot further north than that. It's just a very different, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know a whole lot about Edmonton. You're talking about your B2B, your offering. Could you talk a little bit about reporting up in there? Like, I'm not even sure the size of the city. I know there's a hockey team out there. If you could just talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
So we're the capital city of Alberta, which is the 4th largest province in Canada. We have an oil-based economy mostly, but Edmonton itself is a government town, and so it has quite a bit of a lot of and it's also a university town. So we have like a big university, the University of Alberta, and then a lot of other post-secondaries here. So politically speaking, Edmonton tends to be more progressive than the rest of a pretty conservative province, I would say. At Taproot, even though we're in the capital city, we don't pay a ton of attention to provincial politics other than when it intersects with city politics and city funding and stuff like that. The city itself has 1 million people, and the metro region adds another 500,000. So it's a big, in Canada called a major city. And does that give you kind of a...
Yeah. I think it helps, like, when you talk about the business model to kind of understand, like, the size of the market, the economy there and everything. That's super helpful. Kind of oil economy, capital city, like, yeah, that all tracks and everything.
I definitely think like living in a prosperous place, like a relatively prosperous place, really opens your options for...
Yeah.
It's still hard to make money, and it's hard to get people to part with their money, but it's possible. And our job is to make ourselves like attractive place for their capital and their investment.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a very cool organization. I think you're doing a great job. Obviously, if you've grown it to have any full-time employees outside of yourself, that's a huge win. I was kind of talking to somebody earlier today who was like, we're not going to conquer the world. I'm like, this is an amazing story. You did it by yourself and you have like 5 employees now. And so it is, obviously, you've listened to the podcast, it's 2026. So I'm legally bound to ask you about AI because it's 2026. And everybody has to have an opinion, has to be on every podcast. But I'm just curious, your overall thoughts on it. If you're using any tools, like what you're using them for. There's kind of a lot, it kind of echoes between a lot of people on here, but I like just to keep my finger on the pulse of that stuff. Yeah.
For sure. And it's quite integral to what we do. And I have the advantage of being like the journalism-focused co-founder who has a software developer co-founder, which I don't think all of our brethren in this realm have. And it's like, I wouldn't know how to do this stuff by myself, but Mac is endlessly curious and just wants to see how can we use the tools in order to serve our community. And so if you look at the output that Taproot, like the number of words that we publish every week, it's a lot. it's high quality and it's useful to people. And it would be really hard for us to put out what we do at the quantity and the quality that we do without some help to find the stuff, take the first pass at running the stuff. I'm talking about the little items that are in our weekly newsletters, and then just help with some of the coding that Mac has done in order to make all of that possible. Like, he gets so excited, and I can soak up the excitement without fully understanding the nuts and bolts of it, by just what AI developer tools have made possible. So I'll give you an example. We have municipal elections here every 4 years. In 2021, we started doing this thing where we put together a survey based on a lot of input from our community about that had multiple choice questions asking candidates where they stood on a number of different topics that come up in city council. We gave that survey to all of the candidates running for mayor and council, and then Mac created a kind of a matching engine so that voters could take the same survey and see how they aligned with those candidates. So that was the centerpiece of our 2021 campaign coverage. And it was quite successful at that time. In order to pull it together on time, he kind of had to put it together with chewing gum and baling wire, and it worked, but it was had some technical debt within it. We wanted to do the same thing in 2025 for our election coverage, and he was able to work with with Copilot to find the bugs, fix the things, do the updates so much more quickly than he would have been able to do than he was able to do in 2021, and so much more quickly than he would have been able to do even a year before. Like, it's shocking, he says, how good the tools are at making it possible to build something really robust. And so then we did the survey again, sent it to 94 candidates, 74 of them filled it out, including all 13 of the people running for mayor. And then we had 27,000 people fill out the same survey to see who they agreed with on those things. And we got tons of great feedback from our community that's just like, I don't like paying attention to politics, but I don't want to make an uninformed choice if I'm going to vote. So I was like doing your survey while I was waiting to vote. Things like that. And so like that is another use of, like, we didn't have AI. We used AI to build kind of the bones of the thing to make the technology work and make sure that our website could handle that traffic and all that. It also helped us refine those questions. Didn't write the questions, but it helped us with the first pass on some of them. And it helped us make sense of all of the input we sent out. Like, we started this with an open-ended question to our community. And so then we have like 900 survey answers, and then even more qualitative stuff from listening sessions that we pulled together. Without a large language model helping us make sense of all that, it would have been really hard. I know how hard it was because we kind of did it by hand in 2021 with a lot fewer fewer responses. Yeah, AI is really at the heart of what Taproot is able to do in a lot of different ways.
It's crazy how fast the tools are moving. I was on a call this morning with a friend of mine who's very brilliant, smart, and he's retired, so he has nothing but time to play with these things. And I've been hopping on like one call a month, and he's blowing my mind. It's crazy how fast it's coming along. And I view it, some people are scared in every sector, media included. I view it as a thing where it's like, the internet came and kind of wiped out a lot of local news and information, the business model. And now I view, I'm an optimist, I guess, but I view AI as coming in and removing like a ton of the busy work and stuff. Yeah. And so I think it's like, almost like an Empire Strikes Back. We're not the empire, I guess, so never mind. Big tech is the empire, probably. You know what I mean, though? It's like you get to have a chance to take some piece of the pie back from the bigger your folks and everything. Also,
I
I
do.
wanted to say that I have never related more to a statement than when you said, I don't want to follow politics, but I don't want to make an uninformed
Yeah.
decision. Every time our election comes around here, I'm like, okay, I looked up the top couple of propositions, and then there's 17 judges I have to vote on
Yeah.
to keep them in office or not. I'm like, oh, I wish that kind of resource existed to let me know, to stay informed like that and everything. So that's really cool. I think other people should be thinking along the lines of that.
Yeah. We toyed actually with the idea of kind of white labeling what he built, but the problem with that is that the potential customer base for that, they don't have any money.
Right. Yeah, that's the issue. Unless it's like a revenue generating thing, which it'd be very cool. It'd be really cool to do that. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've kind of been asking everyone recently, just like flash forward 5 years, and it might be different here in Canada. Where do you see like the local news industry headed based on where you're sitting and yourself and Taproot? Like, what are your plans there? Where do you see it in an optimistic 5 years forward from now?
So the stated goal in our strategic planning is to, first of all, become what we are calling the publication of choice for the Edmonton region. And that is an iteration on publication of record, which we're used to thinking about in Edmonton. And we started thinking that way because we know that the newspaper used to be the publication of record. It has shrunk. It has continued to shrink. It will eventually not be there anymore. We have local, like the Canadian Broadcasting Company has, or corporation rather, has, bureaus in our city and all over the city, but there's only so much that they can do in their own shop. So we want to be the publication of choice for readers, for advertisers and sponsors, for people who want to do business with us in any way that you just think that if you want to know what's going on in Edmonton, you got to read Taproot. And we do that in a very ecumenical way anyway, because we're not afraid to link to everybody else. In fact, that's like central to what we do, is linking to the other great journalism that is still done in our city. So then there's a whole bunch of stuff we got to do in order to get that, including growing our readership and growing our revenue to make that possible. And then we do think that if we can solve it here, we can solve the same problem that is in all kinds of different cities in Canada, maybe beyond Canada, because lots of people are in the same boat that we are. And if we can package it up and solve it, then Taproot could be elsewhere. Whether we get to that in 5 years depends on a lot of things falling in place, but we are closer now than we've ever been, I think, to actually like figuring out what's Taproot in a box and how would we take it somewhere else. And so that's what's on the official plan. Me personally, in 5 years, I will be 61 years old. I would like the thing to be able to go without me. I'm very in the business right now and trying as much as I can to be working on the business and like getting it to the point where other people can do the stuff. And I'm the Eminence Grise that just says, gives wisdom or whatever. That would be great if we could get to the point in 5 years where I'm just being wise and useful and sitting on other people's boards and stuff instead of being on the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I'm rooting for you because being from a kind of similar region, rural, like Mountain West down here is what we call it. Kind of what you said before, is nice being in a somewhat affluent area within like a more dispersed area. I know the challenges of real news deserts and places that need it. So you're kind of in that middle ground, I feel like, or if you can figure out how to make it work there, I think you could definitely have some lessons to export to those other more rural and other places that really need it more than a lot of the bigger cities and everything like that.
Yeah.
So I think you're well positioned for that, and especially the technical co-founder and everything. And your mentality, your stated mission, all that stuff. It's good stuff. I'm a fan. That's what I'm saying. I'm a fan of the whole thing. Where can people find you? What do you want me to link to? What do you want to promote? Anything like that? I'll link to it in the show notes.
So if people want to see what we're up to, taprootedmonton.ca is where our news site is. And there's links to all the different things that we do there. You can see our stories, but also dig deeper to look at our weekly newsletters are called Roundups, and our daily newsletter is called The Pulse, and our podcast is called Speaking Municipally. But literally none of this stuff will be interesting to anybody who doesn't live in Edmonton. But if you want to see the kind of things, and then if people want to see what we did for the election, if you go to taproot.vote, you can see that.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll link to all that stuff, so you can just scroll down and click if you're listening to this. Karen, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, it's my
This
pleasure.
is super fun. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. All right. You have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.